The most dangerous moment for a narcissist is not when you confront them, it is when you grow beyond them. Because when you truly defeat a narcissist, not by arguing, not by pleading, but by emotionally detaching, something changes. And the signals they reveal in that moment are extremely telling. If this resonates with your experience, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who may need clarity. Awareness is protection. When you genuinely defeat a narcissist, the first sign is not a dramatic breakdown. It is something much more unsettling. The mask slips, not into tears, not into apology, but into irritation, coldness, and a stripped down glimpse of who they really are. The charm that once felt magnetic begins to look mechanical. The warmth feels rehearsed. The sparkle in their voice fades. This happens because the performance no longer works on you. A narcissistic personality relies heavily on reaction. Your confusion, your pain, your attempts to explain yourself, all of that feeds their sense of power. When you stop reacting, when you stop defending yourself, when you no longer try to correct their distorted stories, you remove the emotional fuel that once powered the illusion. And without that fuel, the illusion weakens. What you start to notice is impatience. They may become short with you. They may appear bored. They may act as if you are suddenly beneath them. This is not confidence, it is ego injury. When they realize they cannot provoke you into the old patterns, the carefully constructed persona becomes harder to maintain. The grandiosity softens into subtle hostility. The smiles become tight. The empathy disappears entirely. You might even catch micro expressions, quick flashes of contempt, irritation, or resentment that were once hidden behind charisma. That is the real person surfacing, not because they want to reveal it, but because maintaining the mask requires an audience that reacts. When you disengage emotionally, you stop being that audience. This shift can feel shocking. You may question whether you imagined the earlier affection. You did not. It was simply conditional. It was designed to secure attachment and maintain control. Once control disappears, the incentive to maintain the charm fades. The most powerful part of this moment is that it is quiet. There is no dramatic announcement, no confession, just a thinning of the performance. And in that thinning, you finally see what was always present beneath the surface. A person unsettled by the loss of influence, struggling to function without the emotional leverage they once relied on. When you truly defeat a narcissist, the smear campaign often intensifies. Not subtly, not accidentally, but strategically. This is not about hurt feelings. It is about reputation management. When they realize they no longer have control over you privately, they attempt to regain control publicly. A narcissistic personality is built on image. How they are perceived means everything. So when you detach, set boundaries, or expose inconsistencies, it threatens the narrative they carefully created. They cannot tolerate being seen as the one who lost influence. Instead of self-reflection, they pivot toward damage control. Suddenly, you may hear that you are difficult, unstable, or ungrateful. They may suggest that you were the problem from the beginning. Notice the pattern. The accusations are often projections of their own behavior. If they were manipulative, you become labeled manipulative. If they were emotionally volatile, you become the dramatic one. This projection serves two purposes. It protects their ego and preemptively discredits you. The timing is rarely random. The smear intensifies when they sense you are no longer reachable. If you remain calm, grounded, and refuse to engage in conflict, that calm becomes threatening. Your silence can expose them more loudly than any argument ever could. So they attempt to fill the silence with noise. They may gather allies, selectively share half truths, or exaggerate small events to construct a distorted story. This is not always explosive. Sometimes it is quiet character assassination, subtle remarks planted in conversations, a raised eyebrow, a sigh that suggests something is wrong with you. It is designed to make others question you without obvious hostility. What makes this particularly painful is that it can feel unfair and isolating, but understand what it signals. A person who feels secure does not need to campaign against someone who has moved on. The escalation reveals insecurity, not strength. The more stable and unreactive you become, the more their narrative may intensify, and that intensity is often the clearest evidence that they feel the loss of control far more deeply than they will ever admit aloud. When you truly defeat a narcissist, the next sign can look like indifference, but it is not peace. It is performance. After all the intensity, the arguments, and the emotional push and pull, they suddenly behave as if you never mattered. The shift can feel brutal. One day you were central to their world, the next you are treated like a footnote. This sudden detachment is rarely natural. It is strategic superiority. When they sense they have lost control over you, they attempt to reclaim power by appearing unaffected. They may amplify their happiness publicly. Social media becomes a stage. New relationships appear quickly. Achievements are highlighted. Photos look curated, almost exaggerated in their perfection. The message is subtle but intentional. I am thriving. I never needed you. But genuine healing does not require an audience. Real contentment is quiet. When someone feels the need to showcase how unbothered they are, it often means they are trying to convince themselves as much as anyone else. You might notice a forced brightness in their tone or a competitive edge in how they talk about their new life. If you encounter them, they may appear overly polished, overly confident, slightly theatrical. That is not closure, that is ego stabilization. They are attempting to regain psychological dominance by reframing the story, not as someone who lost control, but as someone who chose to walk away untouched. At times, the indifference becomes dismissiveness. They minimize the past. They rewrite history. They may suggest the relationship or connection was insignificant. This rewriting serves a purpose. If you were never important, then losing you cannot be interpreted as defeat. The danger here is that you may begin to question yourself. You may wonder if you overestimated the bond. But remember, intensity does not equal depth. Narcissistic attachment is often about possession rather than intimacy. Their sudden indifference is not evidence of strength. It is evidence of adaptation. When manipulation fails, image management takes over and appearing superior becomes the final attempt to control the emotional narrative without ever admitting that control was lost. Another sign that often appears when a narcissist realizes they have truly lost control is a sudden attempt at reinvention. This is not growth in a healthy sense. It is a rapid identity shift designed to regain relevance and restore wounded ego. Almost overnight, they may adopt new values, new interests, even a different personality presentation. It can feel disorienting to watch. They may suddenly present themselves as deeply self-aware, spiritually evolved, professionally unstoppable, or emotionally transformed. The version of them that once dismissed your concerns may now speak the language of healing. The person who avoided accountability may begin posting quotes about responsibility and strength. On the surface, it can look like change, but the speed and timing are revealing. This reinvention usually appears after they recognize that their old tactics no longer work on you. If manipulation, charm, anger, and indifference failed to pull you back into orbit, they try a different costume. The goal is not internal transformation. The goal is narrative control. If they can successfully rebrand themselves, the story shifts. They are no longer the one who lost you. They become the one who outgrew you. You may even notice them adopting traits you once valued. If you prioritized emotional intelligence, they suddenly highlight therapy or mindfulness. If you valued ambition, they amplify career milestones. It can feel like they are mirroring the version of themselves you once hoped for. This can stir doubt within you. You may wonder if they finally became the person you wanted them to be. But authentic growth requires time, discomfort, and consistent behavioral change across situations. Rapid reinvention without accountability is performance. It is an external adjustment designed to stabilize self-image and attract new sources of validation. Another powerful signal that you have truly defeated a narcissist is something subtle but revealing. They begin testing you in small, almost trivial ways, not with explosive arguments or dramatic confrontations, but with tiny probes designed to see if they still have access. They might send a neutral message that seems harmless, a casual, "How have you been?" a vague comment on something you posted, or a piece of information that quietly invites a response. These are not random gestures. They are temperature checks. When narcissistic control is threatened, they do not always move aggressively. Sometimes they move carefully, measuring whether the emotional door is fully closed. If you respond with enthusiasm, defensiveness, or visible emotion, they register that access still exists. If you respond calmly and briefly, they reassess. If you do not respond at all, the message becomes unmistakably clear. These microtests can also appear indirectly. They may like old photos, mention you through mutual contacts, or show up unexpectedly in familiar places. It may seem coincidental, but the pattern often suggests intention. They are gauging your reaction without openly risking their pride. What makes this stage important is that it reveals uncertainty. A narcissist who feels secure in their dominance does not need to test. Testing happens when they are unsure whether their influence still exists. They want confirmation, either that they still matter enough to trigger you, or that you are completely beyond their reach. Your response or your silence becomes information for them. And this is where many people unknowingly reopen the cycle. Curiosity, anger, or even politeness can be interpreted as emotional engagement. True defeat occurs when their tests receive nothing, no emotional spike, no reaction, no reopening of old patterns. When the probes fall flat, they begin to understand that the psychological tether is gone. The final sign that you have truly defeated a narcissist is something that happens inside you, and they sense it. It is the moment your nervous system no longer reacts to them the way it once did. At one time, a single message from them could shift your mood for hours. A look, a tone, a delayed reply carried emotional weight. They were able to trigger anxiety, hope, fear, longing, even guilt with minimal effort. That reactivity was the invisible thread connecting you to the dynamic. When that thread dissolves, the energy changes completely. You begin to respond instead of react. Your voice stays steady. Your boundaries do not shake. You no longer rehearse conversations in your mind. You do not feel compelled to prove your perspective. There is space between their behavior and your internal state, and that space is power. A narcissist may not consciously explain what is happening, but they feel the difference. The usual triggers no longer land. The familiar provocations no longer spark intensity. Even praise or flattery fails to pull you closer. It becomes clear that access to your emotional core is gone. Manipulation depends on predictable responses. When you become grounded and steady, the old script stops working. They may attempt one last tactic, one last emotional hook, but if nothing catches, the realization settles in. You are no longer operating from attachment to them. You are operating from stability within yourself. And once you reach that place, the dynamic can no longer function the way it once did.